All right, I'm back for DustCS's ongoing coverage of Frag X Tap 2, and I'm here with Psycho following his team Sedated's elimination at the local LAN. So to start, obviously not your main squeeze, but how do you guys think you did with this team you assembled for the LAN?
I think we came in a little below our expectations. We really hope to get out of groups. However, I think they've gained invaluable experience. And it's something that they're going to take back and do really well with. I mean, this is a group of young kids. Most of these guys are 19, 20 years old. One of them, I think, is 18 even. Two of them I pulled out of ECA Intermediate, gave them their first season ECA main. We've been, just practicing each week kind of as a side hobby for me. But, I think overall they're doing well.
And what is this roster? What is this Sedated project that attend this LAN? Is it a mixed team just for this event, or is it something more long-term that you're building on the side?
Yeah, so when I started building M80 CS, I just fell in love with the game again, started playing it a lot with Def, who was my IGL in Valorant. We were just pugging a lot, and I fell in love with playing the game and said, screw it, I'm going to put a team together on the side, practice in my free time, and just compete in ESEA and see where it takes us. So we started in intermediate. I think we worked our way up to advanced, or not to advanced, sorry, to main, and last season made main playoffs, and this season trying to make advanced. So I'm just doing my thing to, as an older guy in the scene, to IGL some young kids and use my experience as a coach to help these kids become better versions of themselves as players. And, I promise them each, by the time you're done playing with me, you'll be a better player than when you started.
And it's relatively rare that a manager of a CS team has, a significant number of hours, actively plays the game, is still involved as in the capacity as a player. With that, does that give you any unique insights that you're able to bring back to the to the main M80 project? Does it give you anything you can really bring to these guys in terms of just observations you've had while playing yourself?
I like to leave the coaching to Def, you know what I mean? I helped a little bit early on just structurally as Def transitioned to coach, but after a few months, he's been running the show strategically, and I couldn't hold a flame to what these guys do, right? But, I think having a good understanding of the game, which I carried over from playing CS before and then coaching in Valorant, and having a lot of tech FPS experience helps me in scouting players and scouting talent. And again, this is just an exercise. I've done this in Valorant, I've done this in CS, where I've scouted these young players and developed them long term with the help of Def, and just kind of doing the same on the side with some of these younger players in even lower leagues, and just kind of exercising that part of the brain, so to speak.
Now you're someone who came into the CS scene with a ton of Valorant experience, and now sort of the foundational myth of this TAP Esports Center, Fraglands, is that this was originally, going to be a Valorant LAN, the original event in March, and then they had 0 signups, and then it became a CS event to much success. With that in mind, do you think that the Valorant community, especially the NA Valorant community, loses out on having these local LANs? Because it seems like they don't really want to, nor have the opportunity to play. Do you think that's something that's hurt the Valorant scene's development for a lack of local competition?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a clear lack of Tier 3 developmental tournament play for Valorant. A lot of the tournament organizers have pulled out once the franchising partnership, whatever they want to call it, came in. And Tier 2 took a big hit. Tier 3 absolutely got wiped. So there's not a lot of grassroots opportunity for young Valorant players to come up. And that concerns me in the long term, right? Because we've seen in these franchise leagues what can happen when, the Tier 3 and even Tier 2 ecosystems take a hit. And Tier 1 orgs just start kind of recycling the same players over and over, and it eliminates that opportunity for these young 16, 17, 18-year-old players who aspire to make it to the big leagues to have this developmental atmosphere, to acquire the skill set to get there. So, I think in that regard, it would be great to have this as a Valorant LAN, but, as you see, if no one's going to come sign up and play it, then how are you going to have a tournament?
With that in mind, I believe M80 did actually just part ways with their Valorant roster. Then I believe that was in the Ascension League. What is M80's current headspace towards the Valorant space? What are we thinking about the future of M80's involvement in Valorant, and especially in the Ascension scene as a partnered team?
That's a hard-hitting question. I have to be a bit mysterious with this one because we have a couple coals in the oven, in the fire, so to speak. So, all I can say is kind of wait and stay tuned. We're kind of assessing what's going on with Riot's ecosystem and what our opportunities look like. But I love Valorant just as much as I love CS, and I'd love for us to have a team in the competitive ecosystem in Valorant competing in some capacity.
And something I've always wanted to pick your brain about that is a former M80 Valorant player, Nitro, of course, recently came back to Counter-Strike and is now playing as the IGL of NRG. So, he was in CS, then he went to Valorant, then he came back, then he went back to Valorant. When he was on that M80 roster, I'm sure, he's a consummate professional, but was there always kind of like the vibe that that he was tempted to come back to CS, or like what was going on those last days of Nitro, the Valorant, the Valorant star?
Yeah, Valorant Star, I don't know. He's kind of washed. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Nick, if you're out there listening, great guy. I very much enjoyed having him on the Valorant team as our captain. Excellent professional. You really can't get somebody that's that experienced into your team often. It's pretty rare, so it was cool to have. But I think once things started kind of getting, choppy with Valorant, the CS kind of conversation started to come up, and I think it was just a natural transition for him. I think he was a little bit worried probably about, the optics of kind of flopping back and forth, but I think it was the right move for him, right? I think he's finding success on NRG. We talked about what it might look like if he was on M80 CS, but ultimately decided that wasn't the right option. But I'm glad that he found a home where he's doing well, and I'm glad that we're still beating him. But as long as he's sitting there right underneath us, I'm good.
You mentioned the M80 program, and that's kind of the main course we're going to get to here. It goes without saying it's been a fantastic couple months for this M80 project. They're currently number 18 on HLTV. They're going to be heading to the RMR next month. Been doing great international lands. With the Thank you. With the project now just being now over a year old, how are we feeling internally at M80 about the success of the CS program, and just and more generally about the decision to invest?
It's been a year already. Wow. I mean, I'm really happy with where we're at. I think I did an interview with you where I said this is like a 2 to 3 year build where I'm aiming to be competitive at a top level, and I think that we've kind of exceeded our timeline at various benchmarks along the way. The first thing was qualifying in international tournaments and then getting out of groups in international tournaments, which we just crossed that benchmark at EPL by making quarterfinals. So, I'm really happy with the team's success, especially taking a big hit and losing Mario to G2. He's a key part of our team and someone who brought a lot of firepower to the squad, but I think it's just a testament to the scouting ability of Rory and I to dig deep and find these young, talented players that we can develop into who we need them to be.
You mentioned developing young talent here. We had a chance to talk to Rory in Atlanta about sort of the process of bringing Lake on side from a coaching and IGL perspective between him and Sin. But what was it like to find Lake and bring him on from a managerial perspective? This relatively unknown young player.
Yeah, it was tough. Like I said, losing Mario was a really big hit, and those are really big shoes to fill. They're like size 16 clown shoes, and you're expecting some kid to come in and try and fill those, right? And so we're looking at the talent that we have. With Mario being an NA player, we had to stick to an NA slot. We couldn't look at European, so it's just domestic talent. We looked at potentially some South American, Brazilian talent, but I think ultimately it made more sense to go domestic. We looked at a handful of players who have been kind of floating around and playing roles like that. I had conversations with people like Justin, Fang, Danny, Sixy, but I think in the end we liked, especially once Rory and I started really digging into the demos of Lake, we saw just how much untapped potential there was in terms of raw mechanics, and we saw a lot of moldability there. So, really just being able to bring in someone who we know has the firepower, and we just kind of got to teach him how to play the role a little bit better, how to think and play off his team a little bit better, and be a good teammate, and he's picking it up pretty quickly.
And now, Lake's gone through a couple lands with this M80 squad, and most recently was at Atlanta with the boys. They actually ended up exiting the squad before playoffs, I think, failing to sort of meet their own expectation, falling to Rivals wildcard. But speaking about that rivalry in particular, what can you tell me about that rivalry as someone who's sort of watched the team, have this almost feud with the wildcard guys?
I think it's a fun little rivalry. I mean, I think it's like very genuine, right? And it's almost like a frenemies type situation. Obviously, at this level in the scene, all these guys are friends with each other, and the banter is pretty lighthearted. But I think there's just a genuine desire there on both ends to best the other. We're both kind of at that position where we're the unpartnered teams, kind of building in NACS. We'll go ahead and say it. I mean, they kind of ripped our formula for importing 2 players and matching veterans with young stars. And I really like JBA. I think he gets a little nervous sometimes, but he was pretty locked in Atlanta and he looked good. So it stung to suffer that loss, but I think ultimately that's not a display of them being the better team. It was just a poor showing on our part in the LAN, and I hope to we get the opportunity to run it back with them on land.
You mentioned, you and Wildcard as those unpartnered teams. Well, heading into 2025, every team's going to become an unpartnered team. When we did that first interview, where right before M80, signed the former ATK core, you mentioned how like M80's goal was to sort of survive and thrive as an unranked team. But now that we're heading into the world of VRS, how's that? How are we feeling about what the Counter-Strike landscape is going to look like in 2025?
It's a bummer to see so many of the qualifiers go away, but I also think in terms of rankings and how we performed this year to set ourselves up for success next year, a lot of these tournaments are looking like top 16 invite spots. Not every top 16 team is going to go to every single event. There's so many events next calendar, so there's going to be a lot of trickle down and teams kind of being choosy about which events they want to play, which will cause the 17, 18, 19, 20 teams, which we're kind of floating around that range to grab some invites. So I still feel good about our opportunities next year to get invites to some of these events. I don't think it'll be optimal, but as long as we keep growing and performing well as a team, we'll work our way into that top 16, at which point we'll have the choice.
And now the big event for M80 to end the year is going to be that coming up RMR in Shanghai. What's the mood in the team camp ahead of that? Considering in the Copenhagen RMR, the team came within inches of making their first major.
I think right now the team's just most excited to get back out to Europe. We kind of talked off camera about ECL and how it pulls the team back into NA for extended periods of time when they should be out in Europe getting good practice, which is just the unfortunate reality of the ecosystem this year. And hopefully next year it'll be a little different, right? But, they're wrapping up ECL playoffs, heading to the finals. They just qualified to EPL. So Monday they fly out to Europe. They'll be competing in Thunderpick, and then it's just EU boot camp until China. So vibes are really good. I think the general feel is just kind of like calm before the storm. Not much we can really do out here to train outside of just focusing on ECL and make sure we close that out strong, and then get out to Europe and really get into the nitty gritty of, developing what we need to be ready for China.
And we unfortunately didn't see you in Monterey for the America's Armor for Copenhagen due to personal circumstances. But are we going to be able to see you in Shanghai cheering the boys on?
Unfortunately, no, I won't be in China. I have some other obligations to attend to, but the boys are in good hands. Rory will be there taking care of the guys, and they'll be ready to rock and roll no matter what.
All right, that is Syyko coming out of a local land with his boys at Sedated, and he'll be ready to help M80 hopefully make their first major. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll let you get to work on that.